Hello and welcome back to Fix the Funnel with GA Fix.
Here we go.
We are jumping straight into episode number 6, and I have to say, looking at the research for today, this one feels different. We aren't talking about, some flashy new AI feature or a hidden button in the admin panel.
Yo.
We are talking about the blueprint for GA4 documentation mastery.
It's a topic that usually makes people groan, isn't it? Documentation. It just sounds like the opposite of agility.
It does. It sounds like homework.
Yeah.
But the argument here, and it is a really strong one, is that this homework is actually the key thing separating the analytics teams that scale from the ones that, burn out.
That is the core premise. We always assume the secret to a top-tier analytics setup is, better coding or smarter data scientists.
Or just a bigger budget.
Right, or just throwing money at it.
Yeah.
But when you really look at the teams that consistently deliver clean, reliable data year after year, the common denominator isn't their budget.
It's their documentation.
It's the documentation.
Which is a bold claim. So before we get into the how, let's challenge the why, because I can hear listeners right now thinking, I barely have time to set up the tags, let alone write a novel about them. Is this really the secret weapon?
It is, and here's why. It really comes down to stability. The source material, it calls documentation your long-term GA4 insurance.
Insurance. I like that.
Yeah, think about the nature of a Google Analytics 4 implementation. It's not static at all. It is a living, breathing ecosystem that gets messed with constantly.
Right. New campaigns, new landing pages, new agencies plugging in their own tools.
Precisely. And without that insurance policy, you are totally vulnerable to what the text calls silent decay.
Okay, I wanted to stop on that phrase because it really stood out. Silent decay. It doesn't sound like a big catastrophic crash.
And that's the danger. If your website server crashes, you know about it instantly. The site goes down, everyone is screaming.
It's a loud failure.
It's a very loud failure. GA4, though, it rarely fails loudly. It fails quietly. One change tag, one deleted audience, one little modified trigger in Google Tag Manager. The data keeps flowing, but the quality of that data it slowly erodes.
So practically speaking, walk me through a scenario. How does this silent decay actually play out?
Okay. Imagine a marketing manager is just cleaning up the property. They see an audience list that looks old, so they hit delete. No error message pops up. The website still loads fine.
Everything's okay.
Everything seems fine. But that audience was actually feeding an exclusion list for a high-budget remarketing campaign.
Oh, no.
So suddenly, you are bidding on users you're supposed to be excluding. Your CPA creeps up, say, 10% a week. You don't even notice it until the quarterly review when revenue is down, and by then you have wasted thousands of dollars.
And that is the difference the source highlights.
Yeah.
The undocumented teams only notice the problem after the revenue dips. They're always reactive.
Correct. Whereas the documented teams, the ones who treat this blueprint like gospel, they catch it immediately. Or, even better, they prevent it from happening in the first place, because the person checks the docs first and sees, do not delete. Powers remarketing exclusion.
So the whole goal of this deep dive isn't to convince everyone to love paperwork.
No, definitely not.
It's to extract the specific habits of these teams that, sleep soundly at night because they aren't worried about that silent decay.
That is the mission.
All right, let's get into the blueprint. The source breaks it down into 3 specific habits. And the first one is interesting because it's not technical at all. It's organizational. Habit 1, assign ownership.
This is where most teams fail before they even start. They treat analytics as this, collective responsibility.
Marketing team handles that.
Right. And as the old saying goes, if everyone owns it, nobody owns it. This source is really specific here. It says you need to assign ownership for every single layer of the GA4 stack.
Every layer. So we are breaking this down pretty granularly.
You have to. Think about the components. You have the tag manager container, the GA4 property settings, maybe a BigQuery XMrt schema, and a Looker Studio dashboard.
Right. And in a mature organization, those are often completely different skill sets.
Totally.
Yeah.
The person writing the SQL for BigQuery might not be the same person configuring triggers in GTM.
So the source says every piece needs a name next to it.
A specific name, not a department, a human being's name.
Why is the name so important? Is it just about having someone to blame when things go wrong?
It's more about the speed of resolution. The text notes that the huge benefit is knowing exactly who to call. It moves the problem from a generic, hey, the data looks wrong, complaint to a specific action.
Like, hey, Sarah, the checkout event is firing duplicates. That's your domain.
Exactly. It just cuts through that whole bystander effect.
Yeah.
But it also empowers the team. If I know I am the owner of the lead gen funnel tracking,
Nope.
I am going to be so much more protective of it. I'm going to double check changes. It creates a culture of stewardship.
Okay, so we have the who. That's step one. Now we need to look at the what. This leads us to habit number 2, which the source calls mapping the stack.
Hmm.
And there's a claim here that I really want to pressure test. The source says that if you do this right, a new person joining the team can understand your GA4 setup in an hour.
I know, it sounds optimistic, doesn't it?
I mean, I've consulted for companies where I spent the first 2 weeks just trying to find the login credentials, let alone understanding the data architecture. 1 hour.
It is possible, but only if you have a running map of the stack. The source describes this as a simple file, usually just a spreadsheet, that acts as the central source of truth. It's not about digging through code, it's about reading the map.
Let's look at what's on this map. The source provides a checklist of 6 distinct items. I want to go through these one by one because the details really matter here.
Let's do it.
First up, event logic. It says to document why each event exists and where it fires. For someone less technical, why isn't the event name enough? I mean, if I see generate lead, isn't that self-explanatory?
You would think so, but no, not at all. Let's take that generate lead example. Does that fire when the user clicks the submit button? Or does it fire when the thank you page loads?
Oh.
Or does it fire when the CRM sends a server-side signal back to GA4 that the lead was actually valid?
Okay, those are 3 very different measurements.
Massive differences. If you track on the button click, you are counting spam bots and validation errors. If you track on the CRM signal, you are tracking qualified leads. If you don't document what logic you are using, an analyst 6 months from now has no idea how to interpret the conversion rate.
So event logic is really about defining the trigger.
Exactly. It is the technical definition of that interaction.
Okay, second item on the list, dependencies. The source says we need to map which funnels actually rely on these events. This feels like the Jenga part of the discussion.
That is a perfect analogy. We talked about silent decay earlier. This is usually where it happens. You have an event, maybe something obscure like video progress 50. Someone looks at it and says, we don't need this, it's clogging up our quota, and they delete it.
And then the CEO calls.
Right, because it turns out that video progress 50 was the specific filter used in the main executive dashboard to define engaged users. You pull one block and the whole reporting tower collapses.
So mapping dependencies just means drawing a line from the tag to the report, asking, if I touch this, what breaks?
It is front-loaded work, for sure. But compare that to the time spent rebuilding a broken dashboard while stakeholders are waiting for their numbers. It's an investment.
Fair point. Item number 3, changelog. The source emphasizes knowing what settings were changed and exactly when.
This is your time machine.
But doesn't Google's change history feature already do this?
It does, sort of, but it's technical and really hard to parse. It'll tell you, user X updated JSON object Y.
Which means nothing to most people.
Right. A proper manual changelog is different. It says, February 11th, change session timeout from 30 minutes to 15 minutes to align with the new privacy policy.
Ah, I see. So when you see a massive drop in average session duration on February 12th, you don't waste 3 days investigating a bug. You look at the log and say, oh, right. We did that.
It separates actual user behavior changes from just configuration artifacts. Without a log, every data anomaly looks like a market trend.
Okay, number 4 on the checklist, definitions. Specifically, what each custom dimension actually means.
This is huge for GA4. In old Universal Analytics, things were a bit more standardized. In GA4, you can create a custom dimension for literally anything. Let's say you have a dimension called subscriber tier.
Seems straightforward enough.
Is it, though? Is the output free paid? Or is it tier 1, tier 2? Or is it numerical, like 12?
Mm-hmm.
And critically, what is the scope? Is it a user scope dimension that sticks with them forever? Or is it event scoped and only applies to that one specific hit?
And if I don't know the scope, I could aggregate the data completely wrong.
Exactly. If you treat a user dimension like an event dimension, your reporting will be total nonsense. You need a dictionary. Here's the dimension, here are the possible values, and here is the scope.
A dictionary for the data. I like that.
Oh.
Okay, next up, audiences. Which audiences are powering key campaigns? We touched on this with the silent decay example, but is there more to it?
There is. There's the issue of zombie audiences.
Or zombie audiences?
Yeah, audiences that were created for a specific purpose, say a Black Friday sale 3 years ago, that are still just sitting there populating their eating up your limit of 100 audiences in GA4, and they might still be syncing to Google Ads, totally confusing the bidding algorithms.
So the algorithms are trying to optimize for a Black Friday 2023 audience in 2026.
You got it. If you don't map your audiences to live campaigns, you end up with a graveyard of segments. You have to know, this audience feeds this campaign. If the campaign is over, kill the audience.
It's just good hygiene. Finally, the last item on the map, exclusions, specifically referral exclusions.
This is a classic pain point. You know when you check your traffic sources and you see PayPal.com or Shopify.com as a top referrer?
And you lose the original source. You don't know if they came from Facebook or organic search because the payment gateway just stole the credit.
Right, so you add them to the referral exclusion list, but here's the catch. You need to document why certain domains are there. Imagine a new analyst joins. They see sister-company.com in the exclusion list. They think, wait, we want to track traffic from our sister company as a referral. So they remove it.
And suddenly, all the cross-domain tracking breaks and session counts inflate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The exclusion might have been there for a really important technical reason. If you don't document the why, you risk undoing critical fixes.
That actually transitions perfectly into the third and final habit. We have ownership, we have the map, but habit 3 is what Soares calls the real game changer.
This is the difference between being a technician and being a strategist.
Habit 3 is tracking the reason behind the setup.
The why.
The source puts it so bluntly. Anyone can list events. Only strong teams record the why behind them. But I have to ask, isn't this overkill? We just listed 6 things to document. Now we have to write a philosophy essay for each one.
It's not an essay, it's just a sentence. But it is the most valuable sentence in the whole document.
Give me an example.
Let's go back to that subscriber tier custom dimension. The what is the definition. The why is, we created this to support the Q2 win-back initiative for lapsed users.
Okay, so why does that matter 2 years from now?
Because 2 years later, that Q2 initiative is long dead. If you know why it was built, you know you can safely delete it. If you don't know the why, you just stare at it and say, well, maybe someone is using it, I better leave it alone. And that is how bloat happens.
So the why gives you permission to delete things later on.
It creates a life cycle for your data, but it also preserves institutional wisdom. I've seen teams where they have a really complex setup, maybe firing a tag only after 30 seconds of inactivity.
That's an odd trigger.
A very odd trigger. A new agency comes in and says, this is broken, let's just switch it to page load.
Sounds more efficient.
But if they had the documentation, they would see the why. Reason. We fire at 30 seconds because firing at page load crashed our third-party chat widget back in 2024.
Ah, so the why prevents you from repeating the mistakes of the past.
It stops you from touching the hot stove twice. It converts technical configuration into business logic. It ensures that when your head of data leaves for a new job, their brain doesn't just leave the building. The logic stays right there in the spreadsheet.
That is such a crucial point. We talk a lot about data ownership, but we rarely talk about knowledge retention.
And that is what the source means when it says documented teams always stay ahead. They aren't reinventing the wheel every 6 months. They are building on a foundation of known facts and recorded decisions.
So we've covered a lot of ground. We've established that documentation isn't just paperwork. It's insurance against silent decay. We need to assign names to layers. We need to map the stack logic, dependencies, logs, and we need to capture the why.
It's a pretty comprehensive framework.
But I'm looking at the listener right now, metaphorically, and I imagine some of them are pretty overwhelmed. They're thinking, my GA4 setup is already a mess. Do I have to stop everything and spend a month writing this down?
That is the trap. If you try to document everything from memory today, you will fail.
So what's the realistic entry point? Where does someone start?
The source suggests a really specific call to action, the audit.
Start with an audit.
You don't create documentation from scratch. You create it as you audit what you currently have. Open your tag manager, look at the very first tag, write it down in a spreadsheet, ask who owns this, ask why does this exist?
So the documentation is actually the output of the cleanup process.
Exactly. You are going to find things you don't recognize. You are going to find broken tags. That is good. Fix them, document them. By the time you finish the audit, you have your blueprint.
It transforms the task from writing a manual to investigating a crime scene.
That is a darker way to put it, but yes, it's an investigation. And what you're left with is a clean, reliable source of truth.
And frankly, that seems like the only way to tackle a mature account. You can't just wish for documentation. You have to build it through discovery.
And once you have it, maintaining it is easy. It's the initial build that takes all the effort.
Well, this has been an absolute masterclass in the unglamorous side of analytics. And I think unglamorous is the wrong word now. It's the foundational side.
It's the professional side.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a final thought to mull over. We talked about that nightmare scenario, the revenue dip, the panic, the silent decay finally making noise.
The moment that insurance is actually needed.
Exactly. So here's the question. If your revenue dipped tomorrow because of a silent decay in your data, would you know exactly which name on your list to call? Or would you be scrambling through Slack messages and old emails just hoping someone knows what's going on?
That is the question that determines if you are running a data team or just a data crisis center.
A data crisis center. Let's avoid that. Go run your audit, fix the funnel, and we will see you in the next deep dive.
Document everything. See you next time.